Whether you're fly fishing in a stream, getting those ankles wet, or deep in the ocean casting nets, Fish Nerds. Fish Nerds. Fish Nerds. It's a podcast. Just for the halibut. Fried in a basket.
Hello and welcome to the Fish Nerds, the show about fish, fishing, and eating fish. I'm Clay Groves, Chief Executive Fish Nerd, licensed fishing guide, and your best friend. I'm joined today for National Podcast Posting Month by George Cleveland. Good morning, George.
Good morning to you, Clay.
Now, George, did you know about National Podcast Posting Month?
I did, because you've told me almost every day since the month started.
Right, it's been 20 some odd days. I keep telling you.
Right. But I'm aware that's what it is, and I think it's a great occasion you're rising to.
I think it is. We're trying to drop 30 podcasts in 30 days. Mm-hmm. And I don't even know which number one this is going to be. It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
One
Doesn't
of
matter.
them.
As long as you get them in there.
And the reason you're here.
Yes.
The reason you're here is because you're the grandson of Grover Cleveland.
Right.
One of our presidents. What number was he?
22 and 24.
22.
He's the one that messed up the count.
The only one that wasn't twice in a row.
That is correct.
Until Donald Trump wins the next round, which is looking more and more likely. But we're not going to talk about that.
I'm hearing silence on my end. So.
It's not. Anyway, so much to say about that. We're not going to say it.
Right, but we're going to talk about fishing pet peeves.
That's what we're here to talk about. That's the theme this month.
My grandfather was, among other things, perhaps his greatest love in life, other than public service, was fishing and hunting.
Really?
And he even wrote a book called Fishing and Shooting Sketches that is still it's pretty much readily available on eBay for not a whole bunch of money. And there was a reprint that I think was done in the 30s of the book. It's really entertaining. He writes in that, don't use 5 words when 50 will do style.
Oh, that's the kind of writer he is?
Yeah, which is what you sort of did. And
gotta fill a book up, man.
He wrote these in like the last, 15 years of the 19th century and the beginning of the last century. So it's a series of essays, and some of them are really entertaining. He does things like complain about Cape Cod traffic on the weekends, and that was like in the 1890s.
Nothing's changed.
Nothing has changed. But he took his fishing and hunting really seriously. He took his fun seriously because he was also a workaholic. So he was a playaholic too. And he was a big guy, so the kind of pictures of him, if you like picture him wading into a stream is, sometimes a little difficult. And he used boats. He loved to fish primarily up and down the eastern seaboard, because that's where he spent most of his time. On the Cape and in around New Jersey and New York State when he lived out there. I've been to a number of his old fishing holes and stood in some of them too.
Right, well, he's from Tamworth area.
He had a summer house in Tamworth, New Hampshire.
Right,
yeah.
so it's very likely that where I fish most of my summer is the same places that Grover Cleveland's fished in Silver Lake.
There's a very famous picture of him. I think it's either Connor Pond or Duncan Lake in Ossipee, with a little boy in the boat, which was my father. And there's a lot of great stories about that. But he had some rules and regulations. When people invited him to come down to go hunting or fishing, and they said, "Oh, well, I'm going to be fishing with the president. Oh, this is a big deal." So they do things like overstock a pond, or
you got to make it easy.
Yeah, or he'd shoot one duck and 17 would fall out of the sky. It was and he hated that stuff. But he did sit down and write an essay about his big peeve. And I think this says a lot about people this age, particularly males of that time period.
And what was the year, roughly?
This would have been the late 90s, somewhere late
1890s.
80s, 90s, and maybe early of the 1900s. And that was that, number one, anybody who walks in front of you, if you're in a stream or a river, and roils the water and scares the fish, that was number one. Number two is if he should happen upon another fellow fisherman whilst wading through the streams, that probably the biggest faux pas you could possibly commit was failing to share your flask or your cigar. So
that's fair.
It is. Now I haven't been through a fishing equipment catalog lately to see just how many different kinds of cigar holders or flasks there may be. But
interestingly, we were on Silver Lake in my pontoon boat doing a cigar cruise.
Right.
And we happened upon Rich Collins, who was our fly fishing correspondent. And
right.
He was in his little dinghy, and we pulled up to him, and we totally shared whiskey and cigars with him. We gave him a cigar and a shot of whiskey.
Then you are carrying on the ancient tradition of fisher people, and
That's how it should
good for
be.
you. That is
Yeah.
exactly how it should be, because it shouldn't be, that stuffy and
Yep. And you don't see that in boats very often. You do see it on the ice when you're ice fishing. If you walk up upon a group of ice
sure.
fishers and they've got burgers and dogs on the grill and they got whiskey and beer, odds are good you're being offered something.
And one perk he had as president back then, if somebody sent you a gift, you didn't have to like give it to a museum or something like you do now. So he got sent a lot of fishing flies.
Awesome.
And I don't think he probably ever had to go and buy his own flies, because he kept getting them. And some of them, I'd found a few that I believe we gave to the Museum of American Fly Fishing over in Manchester, Vermont. And I mean, just the most gorgeous salmon flies. I mean, salmon flies are such a work of art. You say, I don't want to get them wet. It's like, having a lap straight canoe. So I don't want to put that in the water and get it wet.
Well, that's how the people who used to, now back in that time, salmon flies were the thing.
Yeah.
And there's some great books written about the rare birds they had to kill to make those flies.
That's right.
You must have read The Feather Thief.
Right.
Right. And a lot of those fly tires were artists, not fishers. And they couldn't care less about the fishing part. It was the art of making that fly. That was so important.
There was no matching the hatch. It's just
They
make the
didn't care.
thing look cool.
Yeah.
And they did look cool. And I mean,
And they caught fish.
And you look through some of those old things, but he carried on. Grover had a tradition. A lot of presidents and their wives. I'm thinking because Jimmy Carter is well known as a big avid fisherman, but Rosalind, his wife, she was also a very, very avid fisher person, and in the lakes and streams down around in Georgia where they were. So I've never seen, and we do have some pictures of him fishing, and I'll have to bring one in. Maybe you can put it on your website or whatever.
Sure.
But he always dressed. He would pictures of him fishing wearing a tie, which is how at one point you'd always wear a tie everywhere you went. You always looked okay. But he was a big guy. He was not as big as President Taft, but in the Historical Society in our own little town of Conway, New Hampshire, there is a pair of his long underwear.
Oh.
And that I gave to them, and it's got a 56-inch waist.
Oh, those are called wide underwear.
That would have been wide underwear.
Wide
Yes,
underwear.
I think at one point, once while playing around having an odd summer night, I think we got 3 people into a pair of his long underwear.
Good times.
But, so share your flask, share your cigar, get with the program.
I think that's a very reasonable fishy pet peeve. George, I'm going to ask you a favor.
Yes.
If I get hold of this book that you'd mentioned, which is what again?
Fishing and shooting sketches.
If I get hold of that book, we do the Fish Nerds Book Club, the Effin' Book Club. Mm-hmm. If I get that book and read it, will you come on and can we do a whole hour on that book?
I've used that book and talks about Grover a lot because so much of it is stuff that hasn't changed.
Right.
Except for he
The
talked
technology
about,
maybe, but
and he goes into there's one great essay he wrote about, why you have to fish if you want to be like a complete human. And he said that you can't trust a statesperson who isn't a fisherman. Mm-hmm. And he goes to explain how the great statesman Daniel Webster composed this very famous speech that he gave, I think, at the commemoration of the Bunker Hill Monument. And that he composed it while he was fishing in the streams of Mashpee on Cape Cod.
Oh, perfect.
And I think it began, something like honorable something. It was one of those tub thumping type speeches. But he said he composed that while fishing. And Grover gave a lot of long talks. I mean, that's what you did then.
Right, that's all you had.
Yeah,
you didn't have TV.
It was your entertainment. Oh God. And and he composed a lot of it while he was out fishing.
All right, so I'm going to get my hands on this book.
I will make sure that you do.
And then we're going to come on and we're going to do a full episode on Grover Cleveland and his thoughts on fishing and the whole thing. So
works for me. Works for me.
George Cleveland. And by the way, listeners who aren't in the know, George and I are friends. We're coworkers.
This is true too.
George is news director here on the radio station I work on, and I'm the morning news guy.
That's
and
also true.
We work very close together, and we're friends. So
and just have these wonderful little things of trivia we can pull out of the sky like
we're
that.
completely useless.
And if people are wondering how on earth a president who was president in 1884 could have a grandchild, Google it.
Yeah, George is very old. Right. That's all I'm going to say.
Right.
All right. Well,
John Tyler has a grandson still alive, and he was president in 1841.
See?
So
you can make babies till you're really old.
Sex and math. That's how it works.
And they didn't have Viagra back then. There's a lot to talk about there. All right.
Right.
Well, this has been the Fish Nerds podcast. If you want to participate in National Podcast, George, thank you, by the way.
My pleasure.
If you want to participate in National Podcast Posting Month, it's easy. You can call the Fish Nerds Hotline, 607-378-FISH, 607-378-FISH. You can grab your phone, go to the memo section, and record your voice. Email that to clay@fishnerds.com, or go to our website, fishnerds.com. Push the little icon of a microphone and record your message right there. There's only a few days left to participate, and we have great prizes we're giving away, including a gift package from Glasswater Angling. And I've got a stack of books on my desk from authors I've interviewed over the years. I'll be mailing them out to multiple people just to clear space for more books. So, anyway, fishnerds.com. Fish Nerds out.